It's hard to argue that there is a general Indonesian identity. Indonesia is made up of dozens of significant ethnic groups and hundreds of minor ones. The Acehnese, though, are very different to the Javanese in a number of respects. The principal difference between Acehnese and Javanese is that Acehnese are much more direct and frank. They're upfront. What you see, to use the cliche, is what you get. With the Javanese, very often what you see is not what you get. They hide their true feelings or true emotions. They believe that to display them is crude or uncultured. Acehnese, on the other hand, believe that to display your true feelings is honest. So this is a fundamental distinction. As the Acehnese say, the Javanese wear their knife at the back of their outfit. The Acehnese wear it at the front where you can see it. They display their intentions openly. Both Acehnese and Javanese practice Sunni Islam, but Acehnese tend to be more devout. There are also devout Muslims in Java, but Javanese Islam is divided between those who are devout, Santri Muslims, and those who are nominal, Amangan Muslims. In Aceh, they tend to all be devout, but local Islam is also influenced by traditional beliefs and practices and customs. And these practices and customs do make Acehnese Islam a little bit different to the devout Sunni Islam that's practiced elsewhere in the archipelago. The language, of course, is different. The Acehnese language, whilst it's a Malay language, is much more closely related to Cham of mainland Southeast Asia than it is to Javanese, or indeed even to Indonesian as it's commonly spoken. Having said that, the Acehnese claim that modern Indonesian, which is based on Bahasa Melayu, was actually a derivation of Acehnese. Now, there are some links, and historically that may have been the case, but it's a hard argument to sustain. The Acehnese historically had a separate identity. Aceh was an independent state in its own right and was internationally recognised as an independent state in its own right up until 1873. So there are a number of ways in which the Acehnese feel that they have a distinct identity: their history, their language, their culture, their religion, and so on. The Javanese tend to be inwardly focused. The Acehnese tend to be externally focused. Their contacts with the world have historically spread to places like Turkey, on which the Free Aceh movement flag is based. Aceh has a long history of trading links and external relations, and in this respect is a very differently focused place and has a differently focused type of culture to that which is found in Java. It's simplifying it, but the Acehnese tend to be more egalitarian. Javanese tend to be much more hierarchical. Well, it's hard to say that there's been a shifting demographic. Of course, there's been generational change, but one of the interesting things of Aceh is that there's a high degree of continuity between the generations. We found that the generation that fought in the 1950s in the Darul Islam Rebellion transferred some of its ideas into the Gam Rebellion, which started in 1976. And of course, Hassan Datiro was a member of the Darul Islam Rebellion and also the leader of the 1976 rebellion. Probably the main shift in demographics that could be noted is that since the 1970s or 1980s, there's probably been an increase in formal education in Aceh. And Aceh has produced a generation of young intellectuals who have helped advance thinking about Aceh's political future in ways that were perhaps not quite as available to previous generations. A number of these young intellectuals have ended up in organisations such as CIRA, the Aceh Referendum Information Centre, which is now reconstructed as a political party, but also in other NGOs, in other political parties and organisations, and as independent thinkers and commentators. And the diverse range of views and thinking that you find in Aceh is actually quite refreshing when you compare it to much else of Indonesia. Many Acehnese actually wanted independence from Indonesia. They wanted to restate the historical claim that Aceh had as an independent country. And that was the basis of the rebellion from 1976 until 2005. The difficulty was, of course, that Aceh is an area with a population of about 4.5 million people. The rest of Indonesia is a state with a population of about 235 million people. And the Acehnese were never going to be able to militarily succeed in this claim. Indeed, they recognised that, and they believed that by having a military presence available, that would keep alive their diplomatic claim and that they would receive diplomatic recognition. But for various reasons, diplomatic recognition never came, and the Free Aceh movement then realised that compromise was necessary and agreed to that compromise in 2005. So it wasn't a need for autonomy as such, rather it was a sense of need for independence, but independence wasn't available and autonomy was the compromise position that they came up with. Why do they feel the need for some sort of separation from Indonesia? Well, the Acehnese believe that they were never part of Indonesia, that Indonesia is an artificial creation of the Dutch Empire, and that Aceh has historically separate identity which they wanted to reclaim. The Acehnese are generally not happy about feeling as though they are economically, politically and culturally dominated by the Javanese. They feel that this is a very uncomfortable fit and an inappropriate fit, so they feel most happy and most comfortable if they're largely left alone to get on with their own business in their own particular way. And under the current arrangements whereby the Acehnese have self-government, at least some of that is now available. For a population of about 4.5 million people, it's now believed that around 200 or 210,000 people died, direct consequence of the tsunami of December 26, 2004. So that in itself had a massive impact on the population. Low-lying areas were devastated, infrastructure, housing was completely destroyed, and it completely uprooted Acehnese society in ways which are still being felt. The reverberations of the tsunami were very significant. It caused everybody, I think, to sit back and reconsider their position, to reconsider what was going on in Aceh, and to think about how they could best work to rebuild their physically and infrastructurally shattered society. Of course, when you lose so many people, about 1 in 20, then that also has a massive impact on the psychology of a country or the psychology of a region. And this is a region, after all, that's been at war, had been at war for almost 3 decades and had a history of conflict before that. So all in all, it was a very traumatic experience, but one that compounded a pre-existing trauma. The tsunami, though, also gave Aceh an opportunity to rebuild, and for territory that was closed off to the international community and to the outside world, the tsunami had the very important effect of opening the territory to the outside world, to NGOs, to foreign militaries that came in the first days and weeks of the international aid project, and really transformed the place and its opportunities for a resolution to the conflict. So whilst the tsunami wasn't the cause of the resolution to the conflict, indeed agreement to have discussions about resolving the conflict was signed off on 2 days before the tsunami, there's no doubt that this tsunami pushed along that resolution, that it was, if you like, an accelerant or an intensifier of the negotiation process. And the international community certainly saw it that way, and indeed told both parties that if there was not peace, they would withhold aid for the reconstruction of Aceh. So that was certainly an incentive in finding a peaceful resolution to the long-standing conflict.